What would you give up to find something real? For Chike Nwozu, the answer was everything, or at least, everything the world thought mattered. At 35, he sat in his penthouse office, overlooking Victoria Island, watching another woman he'd been dating post their private dinner on Instagram. With heart emojis and tags to luxury brands, his phone buzzed with calculations from his CFO about the latest acquisition. Outside, Lagos pulsed with ambition, wealth, and people who loved what he represented, but never saw who he was. The city glittered like fool's gold, beautiful and hollow. He'd built Nwozu Tech from nothing, a boy from Enugu who coded his first app on a borrowed laptop and turned it into a $1 billion empire. He owned hospitals, real estate, and tech startups across West Africa. But success had become his prison. Every smile felt purchased. Every conversation, calculated. Every relationship, transactional. Women wanted the billionaire. Men wanted the connection. Nobody wanted Chike. Just the idea of him. The access he provided. The lifestyle he funded. That night, sitting alone in his marble palace, Chike made a decision that would change everything. He called his most trusted friend, Emeka, and said 5 words that sounded like madness. I'm disappearing for a while. Not running away, he'd still manage his businesses remotely through trusted managers. But he needed to strip away the noise, to find out who he was when nobody knew his bank account. 3 weeks later, Chike Nwozu, tech billionaire, ceased to exist. In his place stood simply Chike, a mechanic with skilled hands and a quiet smile. Arriving in the sleepy Yoruba village of Ajibola, with nothing but a toolbox and a dream of something real. The red dust of Ajibola clung to everything: houses, clothes, skin, dreams. Chike's truck rumbled into the village on a Tuesday morning when the sun hung lazy and heavy over thatched roofs and weathered faces. Old men playing ayo under the iroko tree barely looked up. This place existed in a different dimension from Lagos, where time moved like honey and ambition was measured in harvests, not acquisitions. The main road was barely paved, cracking like dried earth, lined with wooden stalls, selling yams, palm oil, and yesterday's newspapers. He'd chosen Ajibola for its anonymity. No one here read tech blogs or attended society weddings. No one would recognize the man whose face had graced the cover of African Business Review. He rented a small plot near the edge of the village from Baba Suleiman, a weathered elder who asked no questions beyond whether he could pay 3 months in advance. Chike paid 6 in cash, enjoying the simplicity of a transaction based purely on trust and need. No contracts, no lawyers, just a handshake that meant something. His mechanic shop materialized over 2 weeks. A wooden shelter with corrugated iron roofing, hand-painted signs, advertising repairs, and a genuine passion Chike had forgotten he possessed. As a teenager, before the apps and the millions, he'd spent summers fixing engines in his uncle's garage. His hands remembered what his mind had buried under spreadsheets and board meetings. The villagers watched with quiet curiosity as this stranger calibrated carburetors and diagnosed transmission problems with an expertise that seemed odd for someone claiming to be just passing through. But Ajibola had learned long ago not to pry too deeply into the wounds that brought people to their quiet shores. Little did anyone know that the village's newest resident owned more wealth than their entire community had seen in generations. Dr. Bola Adeyemi drove into Ajibola every Monday through Friday like clockwork, her white Toyota marked with the red cross of St. Michael's Hospital 20 kilometers away in the district capital. She was a force of nature compressed into 5 foot 4 inches, sharp-tongued, brilliant, and completely intolerant of incompetence, excuses, or men who thought a medical degree made her less feminine. The villagers called her Iya Agbara, Mother of Strength, though she was only 32 and unmarried, a fact. Her mother lamented weekly during phone calls, filled with gentle accusations about wasted eggs and empty cribs. She'd returned to rural medicine against everyone's advice. Her classmates had scattered to America, England, and private practices in Lagos, where wealthy patients paid in dollars. But Bola had grown up in a village like Ajibola, watching her younger brother die from appendicitis because the nearest hospital was too far and too expensive. That grief had carved out her purpose. She worked brutal hours at St. Michael's and ran mobile clinics in surrounding villages, fighting against inadequate supplies, impossible distances, and a healthcare system that treated rural communities as afterthoughts. Her passion burned so bright it sometimes scorched those around her. But no one could question her dedication. The first time she noticed Chike was when her Land Cruiser ambulance started making a concerning grinding noise near his shop. She'd ignored it for weeks. Who had time for car troubles when people were dying? Until the sound became impossible to dismiss. She pulled in reluctantly, already preparing the sharp comments about village mechanics who'd probably make things worse. But the man who emerged from under a battered Peugeot didn't match her expectations. He was handsome in an understated way, with grease-stained hands and intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than they should. When he diagnosed her problem in under 5 minutes, worn brake pads and a failing alternator, and quoted a fair price, without the usual attempt to inflate costs for a woman driver, Bola felt something unexpected. Respect. Chike found unexpected peace in the honesty of broken things. Engines didn't lie, didn't perform, didn't want anything except to be understood and fixed. A carburetor was a carburetor, whether you were a billionaire or a beggar. In his shop, covered in oil and sweat, he rediscovered the person he'd been before success had complicated everything. The villagers slowly warmed to him. Mama Dupe brought him lunch wrapped in banana leaves. Baba Suleiman shared palm wine in the evenings, and young boys gathered to watch him work, asking endless questions he answered with patience he'd forgotten he possessed. But it was Bola who disrupted his carefully constructed simplicity. She started stopping by even when her ambulance didn't need repairs, bringing him bottled water and arguing passionately about everything from political corruption to the best jollof rice recipe. She challenged him in ways Lagos socialites never had, not about money or connections, but about ideas, values, and purpose. She didn't care about impressing him. She cared about being right, about making him think. "Why are you here, really?" she asked one evening as he cleaned his tools. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, and her question hung between them like smoke. Chike chose his words carefully, offering a truth wrapped in omission. "I needed to remember who I was before the world told me who I should be." Bola nodded slowly, understanding flickering across her face. "I think that's the bravest thing I've heard in a long time," she said softly. In that moment, Chike felt something he'd been searching for. In all the wrong places he felt seen, not for what he owned or represented, but for the quiet courage of choosing presence over performance. The rainy season arrived in Ajibola, like an invading army, sudden, violent, and dissenter, absolute. The sky turned the color of old bruises, and water fell in sheets that transformed red dust into rivers of mud. Roads became impassable, electricity flickered and died, and the village hunkered down into that particular African patience that knows some things cannot be rushed or controlled. Chike's shop became an island in a sea of rain, the tin roof drumming a constant percussion that somehow felt like peace. He was organizing spare parts when he heard the engine, a distinctive sputter-cough wheeze that spoke of terminal problems. Through the curtain of rain, Bola's ambulance emerged like a ghost ship, barely making it to his shop before dying completely. She burst out of the driver's side, soaked and frantic. "I have a patient pregnant woman, hemorrhaging badly. I need to get her to St. Michael's now, but the ambulance just died." In the back, through the back, rain-streaked windows, Chike could see a woman's face contorted in pain, her wrapper soaked with blood, her husband holding her hand with the grip of a drowning man clutching driftwood. Time contracted into crystalline focus. This was the moment his two lives collided, the mechanic and the found. Billionaire. The hidden and the real. Chike's mind raced through diagnostics with the speed of the coder he'd once been. Fuel pump failure, probably water contamination given the flooding. Under normal circumstances, a repair would take hours and parts they didn't have. The woman didn't have hours. He could see her life leaking away in real time, could see the desperate hope in Bola's eyes warring with professional assessment of impossible odds. How long does she have? Chike asked, his voice cutting through the rain's roar with surgical precision. Bola's eyes met his, and he saw the doctor's brutal honesty. 20 minutes, maybe 30. After that, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. The husband in the back was praying in Yoruba, his voice rising and falling like the rain, bargaining with God in the desperate arithmetic of the faithful. Labored, each breath of victory won, against encroaching darkness. Chike dropped to the ground, ignoring the mud soaking through his clothes. His hands moved with a speed that betrayed years of expertise, far beyond a simple village mechanic. He bypassed the failed fuel pump entirely, rigging a gravity feed system using a jerry can, rubber tubing, and a manual valve he'd been saving for another project. It was bush mechanics at its finest. The kind of improvisation born from necessity and brilliance. Bola watched him work, her sharp mind registering details that didn't quite fit. The precision of his movements. The expensive tools, half hidden in his collection. The way he problem-solved, like someone used to finding solutions that shouldn't exist. 8 minutes, that's all it took. When the ambulance roared back to life, the sound was sweeter than any applause Chike had received, at tech conferences or award ceremonies. "I'm coming with you," he said, already climbing into the passenger seat. Bola didn't argue. She was too busy driving like demons were chasing them, navigating flooded roads with the kind of controlled fury that saves lives. In the back, the woman's husband kept praying, but now his prayers were gratitude instead of bargaining. They made it to Street Michael's, with minutes to spare. As the medical team rushed the patient into surgery, Bola turned to Chike, her face streaked with rain and something deeper. "You just saved 2 lives," she said quietly. "Who are you, really?" The question hung between them like a blade. The days after the rescue felt different, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the lingering storms. The pregnant woman survived, both mother and baby healthy, a miracle whispered about in hushed, grateful tones. Throughout Ajibola, the husband tried to pay Chike with a goat, tears streaming down his weathered face. Chike refused payment, but accepted the gratitude, understanding that some transactions exist beyond money. In the currency of life and death and human connection, Bola started visiting his shop daily, but something had shifted. She watched him with new eyes, cataloging inconsistencies. The way he spoke English, with the polish of expensive education, his casual references to places and concepts beyond a village mechanic's typical experience. The sophisticated problem-solving that saved life when it should have been impossible. She was a scientist at heart, and puzzle pieces were not fitting the picture he'd presented. Yet, she didn't confront him directly. Instead, she shared more of herself, her dreams of a mobile clinic network, her frustration with hospital administrators, treated rural communities as second priority, her loneliness in choosing purpose over the easier paths her peers had taken. One evening, as the sun set in defiant gold against purple clouds, she asked the question differently. "What are you running from, Chike? Not who are you, but what are you?" Escaping a subtle shift that acknowledged he was in hiding without demanding he expose himself. He could have deflected again, maintained the fiction, but her honesty deserved something real in return. "I'm not running from something," he said slowly. "I'm running towards something. I lost a long time ago the feeling that what I do matters, for the right reasons. That connections are built on truth instead of transactions. Bola nodded, accepting this partial truth. But in her eyes, he saw the question forming that would eventually unravel everything. Love arrived quietly, without fanfare, in the space between wrenches and diagnoses, between afternoon thunderstorms and shared laughter. It was Bola who fell first, though she fought it with the same fierce resistance she applied to everything that threatened her carefully constructed independence. Chike was different from the men who'd pursued her, doctors who saw her as competition, village men who wanted to domesticate her fire, Lagos professionals who considered rural medicine beneath them. He supported without smothering, challenged without diminishing, and looked at her like she was both mystery and revelation. For Chike, falling for Bola was like remembering how to breathe after years of holding his breath. With her, he wasn't performing wealth or success. He was simply present, simply himself, simply enough. They took walks through rain-washed village paths, sat under the Iroko tree discussing philosophy and dreams, shared meals of pounded yam and egusi soup that tasted better than any five-star restaurant he'd patronized. She made him laugh in ways he'd forgotten were possible, challenged his assumptions, and saw potential in the world that his cynicism had buried under spreadsheets and disappointment. But secrets have weight, and lies, even lies of omission, create distance that love cannot quite bridge. When Bola mentioned needing new equipment for St. Michael's Hospital, complaining about the mysterious owner who approved budgets from afar without ever visiting, Chike felt the ground shift beneath him. When she praised him for being real, unlike wealthy men who treated people as investments, he tasted ash in his mouth. The intimacy they were building was constructed on a foundation of partial truth, and he knew with terrible certainty that foundations built on sand eventually crumble. The truth emerged not in confession, but in collision, brutal, unexpected, unavoidable. A government delegation, visiting rural healthcare facilities, arrived at St. Michael's Hospital with photographers and officials, and among them, a young tech journalist who'd covered Nwozu tech for years. She was in Ajibola, researching a feature on rural development, when she saw him, Chike Nwozu, billionaire philanthropist, covered in grease, laughing with the village doctor outside a makeshift mechanic shop. Her shocked recognition rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. The story broke online within hours. Tech billionaire living secret life as village mechanic. Photos of Chike, working on engines, appeared alongside archive images of him at industry galas. The article praised his social experiment and return to roots, speculating about documentary deals and event publicity stunts. It reached Ajibola before evening, carried on the phones of younger villagers who suddenly looked at Chike with new eyes, some admiring, some feeling betrayed by the deception, all seeing him differently. But it was Bola's reaction that shattered him. She appeared at his shop as the sun was setting, her face a mask of control barely containing fury. "St. Michael's Hospital," she said, her voice trembling with contained rage. "You own St. Michael's Hospital, the mysterious benefactor who approves our budgets. That's you. Every time I complain to you about the owner not caring enough, not visiting, not understanding what we need, I was talking about you." The betrayal in her eyes was physical pain. "Everything between us, was it just entertainment for you? The billionaire playing dress-up with the simple village doctor?" Chike reached for her, but she stepped back like his touch would burn. "Don't," she said, and the single word contained multitudes of hurt. "I fell in love with a mechanic who saw me, but he was a lie, and I don't even know who you really are." She turned and walked away, leaving Chike standing in the ruins of the only real thing he'd built in years. The weeks that followed tasted like regret. Chike tried calling, texting, explaining, but Bola had erected walls that his words couldn't penetrate. The village treated him differently now. divided between those who admired his humility and those who felt deceived by his performance. The peace he'd found in Ajibola was contaminated by the truth of who he'd been all along. His managers in Lagos urged him to return, to leverage the publicity, to transform this narrative into brand enhancement. Everything in him recoiled from that path. He made his choice on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week he'd first arrived in Ajibola. He called an emergency board meeting and announced his decision. He was moving his primary residence to the village, transforming St. Michael's Hospital into a flagship for rural healthcare with Bola if she'd accept as medical director, with full operational control. More than that, he was establishing a foundation to train village mechanics in emergency medical response, to distribute ambulances, to ensure no pregnant woman ever bled out because of distance and failed equipment. Not charity from above, but partnership built on respect. He was choosing to live the truth he'd discovered, rather than return to the lie of Lagos excess. The morning he presented his proposal to Bola, she listened in silence, her face unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You should have trusted me with the truth," she finally said. And he heard the hurt underneath the words. "But I've been thinking about what truth actually means. You showed me who you really are, not through your bank account, but through your hands saving a life when it mattered most. The mechanic wasn't a lie, Chike. He was the truest version of you." She stepped closer, her eyes bright with tears and something that looked like hope. "So here's my condition. No more secrets. You want to build something real? Then be real with me, with this community, with yourself. Can you do that?" Chike took her hands, feeling the calluses, earned through healing, the strength built through service. "Yes," he said simply. "Starting now." And as she leaned into him, he realized that what he'd been searching for wasn't escape from his wealth. It was the courage to use it, while remaining himself, grounded in purpose instead of floating in performance. Comment below. Did Chike do the right thing? Would you forgive someone who hid their identity? What would you sacrifice for real love?